Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Sound the horn of Kygor. The Lizardmen are going to be charging down the Empire's ranks today in this matchup, with Lizardmen being led by Adelmo, and we have the Empire being led by Faust. So for the Lizardmen army, we have gone with a bit of mobility on this side, as we have some Cold One Spear Riders and some Cold One Riders on both of the flanks. Going to be supporting some Skink Cohort with jabs on both sides. The front vanguard is going to be some Chameleon Skinks with plenty of poison to go the way of the Empire. And the front line is going to be some Saurus Warriors and the cohort of Sotex, with most of this army going to be done with the mobility. We also do have a Skink Priest of Beast, going to be bringing Transformation to Kadan and Flock of Doom. And the Saurus Old Blood will be leading the charge, as he is going to be bringing that Horn of Kygor that gives +8 leadership, 24 melee attack, and a nice little charge bonus to all allies in a 40-meter radius when that is used. And then we have the Amulet of Itzel as well, giving a nice 66% damage resistance when that is a one-time deal there, but should be good if it does get caught out by some of the gunpowder units of the Empire. And speaking of the Empire, let's see what they have brought today, as we do have a couple of war wagons in the front line, going to have that nice little 360 fire, and they are a little slow, though. They only have 50 speed, so they are going to have to be a little wary of the Cold One Riders, who do have 66, and especially with the poison from the Skink cohorts and those Chameleon Skinks, going to need to be a little careful there to make sure they do stay away from those, but they do have some armor-piercing values and some good skirmish potential. Otherwise, there is a bunch of infantry for the Lizardmen to kind of get through. It is going to be led by Balthazar Gelt. He's going to be bringing Glittering Robe and Plague of Rust, as long as the Staff of Volin. So a little bit of armor reduction and armor given for the Empire. Now, we do have a couple of Warrior Priest as well in that front line, going to be supporting that infantry fight, and they do have a couple abilities between the two of them. They have Shield of Faith, giving a nice little damage resistance, as well as +22 melee attack with the Hammer of Sigmar, and they have Benediction on both of them for a nice little 8 leadership, with both in a 30-meter radius. Front line is going to be Spears and Halberds, going to be holding back the tide of potentially any of the cavalry and large units. And they do have the Hammer of the Witches as well in the rear, going to be firing away at the approach of the Lizardmen, with a couple of spears and a halberd supporting as well. For the range department, we do have some Free Company Militia going to be providing the gunpowder, as Sterling's Revenge as well. Sterling's Revenge does have immune to psychology, armor piercing, and they do have stock as well over the regular Free Company Militia. So very nice unit there. Really expecting the close range firepower. They don't really have that good range, only 90 in comparison to some handgunners. They are a little cheaper though, so you can bring a few more of them. We have a couple of crossbowmen as well. And that's going to wrap things up for the Empire. So let's get things rolling as both sides do advance. The War Wagon's going to be firing away their shots as best they can into these Cold One Riders, while the rest of the Skink cohorts with javelins and the Chameleon Skinks are going to poison them, getting some nice damage off in that regard, while these Cold One Spear Riders do get a little bit of a circle around, maybe trying to get a little rear charge into these War Wagons, but War Wagons are going to start pulling back, while the Hammer of the Witches, though, is firing away very heavily, getting some good damage there. But man, these War Wagons have taken quite a bit of damage. This one is already down to half health from just the Skink cohorts and the Chameleon Skinks. Now, the Skink cohorts don't have a whole lot of ammunition themselves, but they do have some pretty good damage output, as you can see how much damage they've already done to those War Wagons. And so the War Wagons going to have to be a little careful. They haven't lost any models yet, so they will be able to kind of continue firing away at full capacity, and the Cold One Riders going to slowly move around to the flanks, trying to get in to the nice juicy backline of the Empire. Right now, just going to continually taking the fire from all of these crossbowmen. Now, the Chameleon Skinks do have a bit of missile resist on top of it, so they won't be taking the full brunt of this crossbow fire. But now that the Sterling's Revenge is going to be firing in, and the Skink cohorts going to be just on the edge of melee, getting a few volleys in to the side of the Free Company Militia, doing some decent damage with the last of their ammunition. But man, that Sterling's Revenge is just lighting up those Skink cohorts with javs and doing some good work there. And the Cold One Riders seeing a little gap in the line, able to get on top of the Free Company Militia, but a very nice Glittering Robe in response to that charge, giving +60 armor to that. Now, the other Cold One Spear Rider is going to be able to get a nice little charge into the approaching Spearmen in the rear, while the rest of the units just continue to fire away, getting as much damage as they can, while we do have the Shield of Faith going down, giving us a nice little resistance from the incoming fire. But right now, these Cold One Riders did get broken down by the 2 spears kind of collapsing in on them, and this other Cold One Spear Rider may be going that same route, as it does have an overcasted Plague of Rust on top of it, so minus 60 armor, going to put it at a whopping only 30, so it's going to be taking quite a bit of damage from these spears. But we do have more units circling around, looking for blood in the water, trying to get into that backline, as the transformation to Kadan going to be singling out this Warrior Priest as well, going to be knocking it back, not taking any damage on that initial charge, but it should be able to do some good damage there. Second attack, it does do quite well. But all the gunpowder units is able to rampage that Feral Manticore fairly quickly, and the Cold One Spear Riders now looking to get into the Hammer of the Witches while they still can. They are being hounded by a lot of spears, and a little lapse in micro here by the Empire, as the spears were unable to respond in time, and the Hammer Witches are taking a ton of damage right now, as they are just getting mulched on by those Cold One Riders. Rest of the army is slowly kind of collapsing in on the Empire formation. More rear charges coming in, focusing on the War Wagons this time, while the other unit has gotten broken down. So there is plenty of open area in this Empire line now, as the Lizardmen are getting right into the cookie jar, shutting down the Free Company Militia and the crossbowmen, at least for the time being. And the second transformation to Kadan is being used. Going to be looking to hunt down some either more of the heroes or try and shut down those cannons once and for all. And we'll see where it does elect to charge into, as the Saurus Old One going to be going on top of the Warrior Priest. It does have a Plague of Rust, so minus 30 armor on that, allowing all of these handgun units and crossbows to get some good damage down. But this time the Feral Manticore going to be targeting Balthazar Gelt himself, doing some good damage up in the sky. Now, if the handgun unit or the Free Company Militia do focus fire on that Feral Manticore, could very easily bring it down into these spears with its rampage, and that would be quite helpful for Balthazar Gelt. But instead, it does elect to chase off this Warrior Priest instead. A little slower target, able to get the damage, while Balthazar Gelt would just pretty much be able to fly away from it. He should have more speed than if we do a little check on Balthazar Gelt's speed. He does have 105, so he does outspeed that Feral Manticore, so definitely a good choice choosing a different target there. But that Feral Manticore is just about to expire now, while the Saurus Old Blood is continuing to wreak havoc in the back line, though really kind of keeping all of the handgun units and crossbows kind of focused on evading it, and then keeping its fire away from that front line, as the cohort of Sotek and the Saurus Warriors have been able to really do a lot of damage to that front line so far. And the Feral Manticore itself is being able to put a pounding on a lot of the characters. The Warrior Priest has returned, but is getting compromised now by the Cold One Riders, as well as this very depleted Cold One Spear Riders, but they are able to shut down the Free Company Militia and the Crossbowmen, and they should be able to wrap those ranged units up pretty easily. There is still one full health Warrior Priest, though, able to support the lines, but against the Saurus Old Blood is not going to be able to do a whole lot, and the Empire really needs to rely on trying to keep the Sterling's Revenge, these crossbowmen, and the War Wagons alive, and focus down that Saurus Old Blood, because otherwise they don't really have a whole lot left that can deal with it. They do have some spears and halberdiers, but all those units are getting broken down fairly quickly by these Saurus Warriors, and they really can't hold up to that, because the all of the state troops that the Empire have right now just isn't going to trade well into the Saurus Spear or Saurus Warriors at all, and they need to make sure that this Saurus Old Blood does go down, and they can't rely on having the infantry win that fight. We do have a nice flock of doom, though. It's going to be catching the Sterling's Revenge. These Free Company Militia might be just enough to rout it. It looks like their leadership will be able to stabilize, and having that Warrior Priest able to keep them alive and well is going to be quite helpful indeed, while the rest of the mobility of the Lizardmen is off chasing down these crossbowmen and some more of that Free Company Militia. And the Saurus Old Blood is going to be kind of pulling out. Does pop the Horn of Kygor, giving himself a little bit of extra leadership there to keep him in that fight, while these King cohorts are keeping those spears nice and busy on the flanks, while we do have more units collapsing in upon the rest of the units. These Cold One Spear Riders getting shot down by these Free Company Militia, but the Free Company Militia do still rout themselves, and there is only the Sterling's Revenge, and the Hammer of the Witch's crew is still alive and well, and here is its artillery pieces, but I don't think they're going to be getting back on those. Those Saurus Warriors with shields going to make sure that does not happen in the slightest, and the spears are definitely getting worn down, and all of the time that these are getting beaten down is less things that can deal with that Saurus Old Blood here. And at this point we have a beautiful another flock of doom going to be catching the spearmen, as well as that crew trying as it might to get onto those artillery units. But at this point, I don't know what else that the Empire has to deal with that Saurus Oldblood, as the Saurus Oldblood has been very careful at keeping to the edge of the engagement, especially with him at low health, and as long as he can kind of last, the Saurus Warriors should be able to win the fight against any of the Spearmen, though with that Warrior Priest should be very helpful in kind of dealing with the Saurus Warriors. However, there is still some Chameleon Skinks on the flanks with their poison, and the Sterling's Revenge is getting very low health as well, and seeing at the Sterling's Revenge is a little occupied, that Saurus Oldblood is going to be charging in, but taking a bit of damage off the charge here as those Sterling's Revenge does open up. And in comes that Saurus Oldblood, though, getting a nice little charge. He does have a Plague of Rust cast on top of him as Balthazar Gelt trying to deal as much damage as he can, seeing as the last of his real counter is here, and the crossbowmen who would like to be firing in are currently occupied by the cohort of Sotek, who are unbreakable themselves. And now the Sterling's Revenge do finally rout, and things are getting chased off for the Empire left and right. And there is not a whole lot left that the Saurus Oldblood needs to fear at this point. He does still have to worry about that Warrior Priest, but otherwise all the range units are slowly being dealt with. And now Balthazar Gelt trying as he can to try and deal with things. He does look like be casting Glittering Robe, giving himself 60 armor, but he is no melee combatant, able to dodge that little attack by that Saurus Oldblood, but it is only a matter of time before he does find his prey, as the rest of the units slowly getting broken down for the Empire, and things definitely looking very, very good for the Lizardmen at this point. Again, not a whole lot left that the Empire can do. The only thing that they do have is Gelt, pretty much holding that balance of power where it is. Otherwise, these Skinks continuing to just wear down these Spearmen, and at this point, I think it is going to be done and dusted. With that Warrior Priest routing, nothing can stand up against that Saurus Oldblood, and the Lizardmen are going to take this fight. It's only a matter of time before army losses do finally trigger. Gelt trying as he can to break free these Spearmen to allow them to focus on the targets that they need, but it is going to be for naught. And the Lizardmen going to be getting it, and as soon as these Saurus Warriors charge into these Spearmen, I think army losses will soon take effect here. And I'm not really sure what the Lizardmen is really waiting for at this point. These are the only two things left on the field. Trying to use up the last of its ammo, I suppose, and chasing off what is left on the flanks. But the Lizardmen have nothing to fear at this point. Only two spears. They will not be able to beat the Saurus Warriors, and Gelt himself is not going to be able to beat down the Saurus Oldblood, as he does cast Plague of Rust Overcasted, and he is going to try and dive in, but he is just kind of stuck up with some other Saurus Warriors. Not going to be able to stay free of that big old Carnosaur, as he is hunting down Gelt, getting a nice little attack in the rear, and that is going to push army losses, and the Lizardmen do take the fight. So take a little look at the after-battle report. Take a look at the Empire first. The War Wagons doing some good work. They were able to use up pretty much all of their ammunition. They did take quite a bit of damage early on. However, they didn't lose any models. They were able to continue firing away at peak proficiency. The Hammer of the Witches, unfortunately, didn't do so hot, only getting about 600 in value, and it was compromised fairly early on, but it had the range where it should have been able to get some better value there, but a little bit of lapse in micro. The spears that were protecting it were not able to respond to the charge of the Cold One Spear Riders, and the Cold One Spear Riders did do quite well. They just had enough mobility to really deal with getting into that back line of the Empire, and they did quite well. I mean, the values weren't really there, but the disruption that they provided was what was key, because as soon as all of these ranged units were shut down, that Saurus Oldblood really didn't have a whole lot to fear, especially in that late game. And despite the fact that the Empire had the vast majority of the infantry here, the Saurus warriors were able to do very well, and even the cohort of Sotek able to break through and do quite well. And even the skink cohorts with javelins acted as a nice little melee combatant, able to really break things down. But the damage was pretty spread out, even though this Chameleon Skink did get quite a good value, almost 1200 there. And the Feral Manticores as well, able to deal with the Warrior Priests, who just were really lackluster. They were supporting their infantry, and I think that with the Empire army that was brought, it needed some mobility. You usually expect to see either Outriders, which are a very good mobile tool to deal with either the large targets for the Lizardmen, or you see Demigryph Knights. And I think definitely having the Outriders over the War Wagons would probably have been a little bit better, even though they did do quite well. Having maybe a few Outriders in, and maybe even a Demi or two may have been the way to go, or at least the Outriders I think would have been necessary here. But otherwise, it was well played by Lizardmen and well fought on the Empire side as well. That is all I have for you today. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.